Ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ma'am, are we ready to start?
I am ready.
Okay.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of IP College community and the participants of the course, I take this privilege to welcome our esteemed speaker for today's session, Dr. Anandita Roy Saha. First of all, thank you so much, ma'am. I would like to extend my gratitude for extending, for you that you accepted our invite, and I believe that it's going to be a great session. And now it's my privilege to introduce ma'am. She's my teacher, and she is teacher of both of us, Mai and Naveen, and I have heard her, and I'm listening to her lectures, and it's always a privilege to listen to her, and it's always a great learning experience. So I will now take this privilege to introduce you, ma'am, to all the participants of the course. So Dr. Anandita Roy Saha is an associate professor at the Department of Economics and the head of the Department of Environmental Studies in the Professor College for Women, University of Delhi. She is the coordinator of the Center for Earth Studies at the IP College, which is a research and learning center aimed towards interdisciplinary initiatives for environmental protection and sustainable development. Ma'am is a visiting faculty at the Department of Environmental Studies, University of Delhi, where she teaches environmental economics and resource economics. Dr. Saha has studied at Jadavpur University, Kolkata, and Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. She obtained her PhD degree from JNU in the area of energy economics. Her area of specialization is development economics with a special focus on the economics of energy, environment, and resources. She has been associated with the University of Delhi, Jawaharlal Nehru University, University of Delhi South Campus, Ambedkar University, Delhi. The list is long. Nalanda University, Amity University, in various academic and professional capacities. She has many scholarly articles in national and international journals to her credit. She has supervised several research projects and participated in international and national level conferences, seminars, and workshops in areas covering environmental education, climate change, disaster management, and environmental sustainability. And it is always a privilege, and it is always a great learning experience to listen to ma'am's talk. So now I would like to hand over the session to ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Neha. Thank you very much for your very kind words. Students are always in love with their teachers. So they say a lot of nice things, as Neha was doing just now. There was actually not much need of, saying so many things about me, because I also belong to the same organizing team. I mean, we are working together. Naveen and Neha have been, as she was rightly saying, they have been my students, but now they are my colleagues. So all of us together have designed this course, and I hope I am able to contribute today's through today's session something that is interesting to our participants in the series that you have been following. This is the end of the third week, so the online certificate course that you are attending, and several things you have already listened to, and I'm sure it is a nice learning experience for all of you. It definitely has been for me, and I'm just trying to put a few things before all of us which concern us in our current existence, related to our existence in this planet, in an urban city like Delhi, and issues of climate induced issues, climate related issues, which we are facing at several levels. So I would like to put my discussion and my presentation from an urban perspective. I would try to look at the question of climate change issues that we have been listening to at several levels in deep, great depth, deep discussions have gone there. But perhaps one question bothers all of us is, where do we as individuals or as a society or as a community stand, and what roles can we play, if at all, or what roles have we played in the past, and what is it that we can think for the future? So I would like to present the discussion from our perspective, from a very urban city perspective. Just give me 2 minutes to set my presentation. I hope my screen is visible, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So as the title suggests, I would be interested in talking about urban communities, communities that we belong to, okay? And cities, cityscapes, communities, and our role as related to the broad question of sustainability. Sustainability by now might be a very, well-known concept. I mean, it's perhaps overused. There are several other terms which have come. For example, resilience. Resilience has taken a very prime position in all our discussions. However, these questions of sustainability, resilience, climate change, all these things are interrelated, overlapping concepts. So that way, let sustainability be the good guy and remain there in the context of our discussion on cities and urban communities. As we are aware that our course is designed as and titled as Climate, Community and Conservation. So climate and climate change induced occurrences are what have driven us to all these self introspection and query and understanding for future policy designs, future actions. So how does climate change affect communities? There is no doubt about the effect that climate change has brought in, is bringing in, and will bring in if we continue to follow the same kind of pace of economic progress. Climate change is affecting communities. So I don't really need to go into the details. We all know what havocs climate change can cause, and the different types of climate action, the actions that we can take to tackle those questions, tackle those problems, is something which is the burning question. We definitely, as the human community, we definitely want to save ourselves, but let us remember that communities here should not be confined only to us, and that is one of the major mistakes, if we may say, we have made. Humankind has made that mistake of considering ourselves as the community on the planet. However, when we are looking at it from the human perspective, our focus is on human communities, but community actually is a much broader term. And communities, societies, along with the right kind of state policies and scientific intervention, scientific discussion, discovery, innovation, and invention, we can actually work towards climate action. You have been hearing these things in several of the previous discussions. And in this, if we may say that science, state, and society are actually the three pillars, then we perhaps explain our positions as well. We all, as members of the communities, members of societies, we have our roles. And why do we all need to be active? Why we need to be proactive, actually? Because we all are stakeholders. We all have a stake. It's our existence which is in question. And we all, through all economic policies, political policies, scientific and technological policies, through every possible policy, we try to find out a best possible solution for the society, for social well-being, human well-being. So whatever we may do, the basic philosophy of all our actions is to have a good life. So social well-being, social welfare, and social sustainability, existence. So these are the most fundamental principles of all the discussions that we have. Now, what is a community? We are talking about communities as stakeholders. And as I said, it's mostly an anthropocentric discussion that we are going to have because we are looking at ourselves. A community is typically defined as a group of people who are living in the same space, or they may not be living in the same space, but they have some common features. They share certain common attitudes, they have some common interests. That is what defines a community. Like when we say student community, we don't mean that every student is located in the same place. So there's a common sharing platform which defines a community. Typically, we talk about rural-urban divides when we talk about communities, a rural community or an urban community. We talk about an agricultural community or an industrial community. Village communities are very strong economic groups. And if we may say, urban communities are the least coherent ones. Village communities are generally very coherent because the basic economic interest that they have, mainly agriculture, is something which ties the people together there. On the contrary, urban communities, city communities, are such where we don't really have much stake in common, or rather we have stake in common, but we do not really have actions in common. And therefore, we are not a very coherent unit. And that is where the problem lies. Compared to forest communities, say, forest communities, they live out of CPR. CPR means common property resources. So therefore, they have something very common as their interest. And we have seen through several studies that involvement of the communities, participation of the communities who live in the fringes of the forest, or in some cases within the forest boundaries, they can really do a very efficient management of the forest resources. So forest communities are therefore very, very important communities as well. So rural communities, urban communities, forest communities, these are different types of economic groups, communities who share some economic actions or some economic similarities, and therefore they share economic and otherwise stakes which are also comparable. As we already said, cities are our point of interest today, and cities are perhaps the most problematic because we are the least coherent human settlements. We are human settlements which which have administrative boundaries, well-defined administrative boundaries, but from an environmental or ecological perspective, we are not really one uniform unit, not a homogeneous unit. Cities, therefore, are hotspots of economic action. Most of the economic actions, I'm not saying the prominent actions are taking place in cities. Agriculture is a very prominent action which takes place in the rural areas. But other production of goods and services, they are generally most dominant in cities. Those who are students of economics would know that the general definition of economic development talks about a journey from agriculture to industry to services, from primary activities to secondary activities to tertiary activities. So in that sense, the second and third stages of economic development, where production becomes very important, those are mostly city-centered. And following those, all other systems, very extensive systems come up. Those are developed around the cities. Village systems, rural systems are much more simpler compared to the city systems. These systems, as we all know, they talk about housing and settlement, human settlement, housing, and land use pattern. When we convert the land spaces to industrial spaces, production spaces, then we are primarily changing the land use pattern. The way land is used in forests, the way land is used in villages for agriculture purpose, and the way land is used in urban centers for mainly production purposes, they are different. And with growing urbanization, these patterns keep on changing. And people reside here. These become settlements, human settlements, dense human settlement. And in those settlements, naturally, we have these supporting services, the public utilities, power, water, transportation, communication. And when we are doing all these things, definitely we are generating waste. Therefore, waste management also becomes a part of the city management, the urban management, sanitation. All these are the extensions of the city or the urban existence, where a lot of problems have concentrated, as we all know, and that is what we would like to investigate. These are some of the very common pictures of current day cities. I don't know whether you can guess these cities. Anybody who can guess? This is Bogota, Colombia. This is Los Angeles, USA. These two are in our own country. Any guess for these two? Which city may this be and which city may this be? This is Bengaluru at night, and this is Kolkata during the day. I think these pictures tell us what cities are all about, why cities are hotspots, and why cities are matters of concern. When we are talking about sustainability, when we are talking about climate change, when we are talking about climate-induced problems and threats and challenges, I think these pictures tell us where the problem originated from and what we are heading to. If we look at some basic data, we would find that 56% of the world population live in cities. More than half of the population is living in cities. And in developed countries, 80% of the population live in cities, whereas in developing economies like ours, 51% of the population live in cities. So irrespective of developed or developing states of development, cities are most dominant, as you can see, more than 50%, and in developed societies it's as high as 80%. And if we look at the figures for the rate of urbanization compared to the 56% that we have for 2020, we would find that there has been major increase, and the trend says that by 2030 it will rise to more than 60%. What is a matter of concern for us is that 90% of the urban growth is predicted in these three countries: China, India, and Nigeria. These are the three countries which have been found to be most at risk, if we may call it a risk, of very, very high urbanization. 35% of the growth will be accounted for by these three countries. So as Indians, we definitely are at high risk, and it's a kind of an alarm that we should be worried about. In this context, let us look at the goals of sustainability, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which everybody knows about today. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals which we have to meet by 2030. And the predecessor of the SDGs was the MDGs. At the turn of the millennium, we had Millennium Development Goals, and the targets were to be met. Those were 8 in number, and targets were to be met by 2015. And from 2015 to 2030, we have moved to the Sustainable Development Goals. I mean, if you may note that in the first 8 goals, the first 8 MDGs that we had, MDG 7 talked about environmental sustainability. If we look at the SDGs now, then we find that there are several goals. Of course, it's much higher in number. There were only 8 earlier and 17 now. So double is the number of goals that we have. But more than double is the number of goals which are related to environment and climate. 12, 13, 14, 15. Responsible consumption and production. This is our caveat, because we say cities and we all are part of this irresponsible consumption and production in the cities. SDG 12. SDG 13 talks about climate action. As you have been witnessing, the major climate disturbances, climate changes, natural disasters, actions against those, climate migration resulting from the climate disasters, these fall under SDG 13. And then we have SDG 14 and 15 to talk about life underwater and life on land. We can also say SDG 6 and 7 are also related to the environment, because these 2 goals talk about clean water, clean energy, and sanitation. These are also environmental goals. So 6, 7, 12, 13, 14, 15, all these are environmental goals, plus SDG 11, which is going to be my focus in the rest of my discussion. Sustainable cities and communities. This is SDG 11. Sustainable cities and sustainable communities. This is what we all should be aiming at. Sustainable cities are urban spaces which should be designed in order to face the environmental challenges, the climate crisis. How by improving resource use. Consumption and production are the two most fundamental economic actions that we as economic agents do. And in the process, we use resources, we generate byproducts, and sustainable cities and sustainable communities therefore focus on improving the pattern of resource use. We know the problems associated with resource use. On one hand, resource use has a problem of depletability, exhaustion, because we do not have indefinite supply of resources. And in the process of using those resources, we create environmental damage. Pollution is one major example. Even a child knows what pollution is all about. So reduction of pollution, reduction of environmental damages, and having a more efficient resource use pattern in cities, and the role of the communities in doing that. In cities, we also have other entitlements, as we were talking about earlier: energy, water, housing, transport. All these things are entitlements. If we go a little deep into the meaning of development, we will see that the word development has become a cliche and everybody uses this word. Even when we are trying to mean economic growth, we are saying development. Economic development talks about an overall multidimensional improvement in the quality of life, where all these things become a part of basic entitlement. I mean, this is Amartya Sen's concept of entitlement, that every citizen should be entitled to a basic minimum bundle of facilities. And these, the ones which are listed here, are part of those basic needs for a basic minimum quality of life. Safety and security, that is also an entitlement. So it's not only roti, kapra, and makan. Those are part of economic entitlements. But there are entitlements which are beyond the mere economic entitlements. There are social entitlements, and there are ecological entitlements. Having clean air is an entitlement. And if we are not having those, and we are not having those, it's known for sure, then it is called entitlement failure. Professor Amartya Sen introduced this term, entitlement failure. And the problem that we are facing today is a problem of entitlement failure, because we are not getting clean environment, we are not having our ecological rights, even our lives are not safe and secure. Safety and security from various angles. From a social perspective, we may talk about crime and violence. From an ecological perspective, we may talk about pollution and environmental challenges. We can also talk about the question of security and safety at threat from the natural disasters which we are having. So global warming to natural disasters, cyclone to flood, everything is putting the safety and security of our life into question. And as we have already stated, that life is what is supreme in all discussions that we have, because we are talking about well-being, human well-being for sure, but now we must increase the domain of well-being to all members of this planet. Sustainable cities is a big challenge, because with rapid industrialization, having a sustainable city, having a sustainable setup, human settlement, which is inclusive, which gives you economic options, but at the same time provides you ecological balance, is definitely a challenge. So sustainable cities, or sustainable city as a concept, is a very, very major challenge. It has to create career options. It has to give them business opportunities. I mean, it's just like saying what we have been saying during the COVID period. We are still saying the trade-off between life and livelihood. So a city has to provide a balanced bouquet of life and livelihood. It has to give economic options, opportunities, but at the same time, it has to provide safe housing, safe and affordable services. We also have to have, environmental quality. So sustainable city will have all these that we have talked about: inclusive and sustainable urbanization process, which creates career options, business opportunities, which provides affordable and safe housing, safe basic services, basically public utilities, as we have been talking about: water, electricity, energy. When we are talking about energy, we must remember that we must talk about clean energy, clean fuel. Maybe at some other stage we can talk about those. The problems associated with indoor pollution because of dirty fuel. So all these are part of city living. We also must create green spaces in the cities because that is what brings in the green component in our existence. Cities cannot do without public transport because city life is all dependent on communication, travel, transport, and communication. So that system also has to be made sustainable. And for these things, we have to have a very well planned, well thought out city planning system where we include everybody, where the citizens, the stakeholders participate in the most efficient way. So as you can see, sustainable city is not easy. In the Sustainable Development Goal 11, which says sustainable communities and cities, by 2030, we have to reach a lot of targets. There are 10 targets, and for that, there are 15 indicators through which sustainable city are to be built, maintained, and made sustainable. It's not a one-term thing that by 2030 you do it, you are doing it at by 2030, but you're looking at scenarios, as you must be aware, that we are talking about 2030, 2050, 2100, the entire century. So these are the different landmark periods that we are talking about. So creating such cities and sustaining such cities is what the challenge is. These sustainable cities should be providing, as we can see, adequate, affordable, and safe housing for all. These are the targets that we have, targets and indicators. It should provide safe, affordable, and accessible sustainable transport. It should be inclusive of sustainable urbanization, where we have human beings participating in that integrated system. We have to also protect and safeguard the natural and cultural heritage. This is something which takes us beyond the economic vision. From here, we are looking at broader perspectives, broader issues, economic and then ecological. We have to safeguard, we have to protect our heritage. And heritage, not only the monuments, not only Qutub Minar and Red Fort, but our natural heritage. The green spaces we have, the wet spaces we have, all these things are part of our heritage. So sustainable cities should target at maintaining those. Sustainable cities should also, as we say, target at safety of life, safety and security of life. So it must be focusing on reducing the number of deaths due to natural disasters as well as economic losses, say road accidents. These are also part of sustainable city living. That it should not mean that when you are living in sustainable cities, you are more at risk of road accidents and you take it just like that. That is also part of a goal that we must be trying to reduce. The other goals, I mean, I'm just extending the goals as stated by the United Nations. Reduce the adverse per capita environmental impact. This is our environmental entitlement. We should not be subjected to poor air quality. We should not be subjected to polluted water. We should not be subjected to the byproducts of misplaced waste management systems. So that is also a goal, because these are all parts of our basic needs, environmental rights, ecological rights. Safe, inclusive, accessible public green spaces. And we must keep in mind that this has to especially focus on women, children, aged, and the disabled. Because these are the ones who are marginalized, these are the ones who are less privileged. So if we are talking about sustainability, then we must keep in mind that sustainability is not only economic, sustainability is not only ecological, sustainability is as much ecological and economic as it is social. So social sustainability must take care of these segments of the urban communities, women, children, aged, and also the disabled. If we have to create sustainable cities, then we must increase the number of cities and settlements with these 4 features that are listed: resource efficiency, mitigation measures, adaptation to climate change. There should be measures to, say, for example, adapt to global warming, adaptation to the erratic pattern of rains that we are witnessing as we speak. We must be having resilience towards disasters, And in cities, it's not only cyclones which we are observing. I mean, in the recent years, we have witnessed along our coastlines several cyclones. I mean, Ayla, Bulbul, Yash, Tukte, Amphan, Funny. I mean, the count is in Nisarga. It's endless. The count is endless. But disaster is not confined only to those. Even having floods in Jamuna is a disaster, which cripples the city of Delhi. Fire, earthquake. Delhi is on the bed. It's the hotspot. A high risk for earthquakes. The entire Himalayan belt is. So resilience to all these disasters, flood, fire, earthquake, cyclone, all these are part of sustainable living in cities. And therefore, disaster risk reduction is one of the announced targets, that people who are living in these places must not be subjected to higher risks of disasters. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are binding on all nations. All nations have agreed to take those as a mutually agreed upon development goal. To create a safe and resilient urban space, the government of India has also taken several measures, and all these names, as you can see, are known. These are well-known names from 2014-15. These missions have started. Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or Swachh Bharat Mission is a very well-known one. I won't really go into the details of those because these are very well-known. The National Smart Cities Mission, I'll talk a little about that. Then we have the Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation, AMRUT. There was another one, a predecessor to that, JNURM, Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renovation Mission. So that was also something which was focusing on urban transport. This one is talking about rejuvenation of urban transformation, including in a big way urban transport. Then we have Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. It's about settlements, housing and settlement. And by the time we were designing these things, the UN Sustainable Development Goals were already in place. Recently, the Niti Aayog, National Institution for Transformation of India, has published its progress report very recently, where every goal has been presented in terms of its performance. And if we look at that report, we would find this as the performance of India in the SDG 11. SDG 11, I'm repeating, Sustainable Cities and Communities. Only 0.8% of the urban households live in kacha houses. This may look very impressive, but the caveat is that this should have been zero. In urban households, this target was zero. And this is not really capturing the right picture of the condition of these houses. We may say rest of the population is living in as what we call pakka houses, but the condition of those houses, their vulnerability to fire hazards, their vulnerability to earthquake hazards, all these things are not really captured in this one small number. Even then, this is not a zero. This should have been a 0%. The target is zero. 87.6% of the urban households have drainage facility. This should have been 100. 96% with door-to-door waste collection. There is a big question mark there. There is a lot of debate of what kind of waste segregation and waste collection takes place in reality. But even then, it's also something which should have been 100%. It's not. 68% of municipal solid waste is processed. This again should have been at the target rate of 100. 78% of households, they segregate at source, a big question mark. We don't really know how authentic this number is. Personal experience and personal, guess, perhaps will prompt all of us to question this number. But this is what the official figure is. 39% of the generated sewage get treated. So as you can see, the targets should have been either, if it is a social bad, the target should have been zero. The target is zero and the achievement should have been zero. And if it is a social good, the target is 100 and it should have achieved 100. So we cannot really say that we have done really very well in terms of SDG 11, which leaves a lot of scope for a lot of work to be done. You can also see the number of deaths due to road accidents. Okay, this should have been in a civilized, sustained city, in sustained living conditions. It should have been again zero. As I said, I'll talk a little about the smart cities because there's a lot of noise about smart cities. Smart city is typically a technological concept. It's a technologically modern urban area. So when we are talking about green spaces, when we are talking about sustainable spaces for the urban centers, are digitally connected, technologically developed cities. That is the idea. It uses a lot of electronic methods, ICT and IoT, the prime movers in the smart city concept. Information and communication technology, that is ICT, and IoT, Internet of Things, everything connected by the internet. That you are working at your workplace and through the internet you are giving instructions to the gadgets in your house. These kind of things are also under IoT, Internet of Things. So ICT and IoT, then voice activation methods, sensors. So these are the things which are used to collect a lot of data. That is what the fundamental principle of smart city is. And with those data, the idea is to manage assets, resources, services, all these things very efficiently, including traffic, power plants, water supply, waste management. So these kind of developmental goals, as well as detection of, say, crime and violence, other socio-technical information systems. So all these things are under a smart city mission or a smart city network. Schools, libraries, hospitals, and other community services, these are also supposed to be connected through this so-called communication revolution, ICT, IT, ICT, and IoT. So this is the whole idea of smart city. So as I said, smart city has got a lot to do with digital living, and it does not really talk about so much of the ecological issues which we bring in when we talk about sustainable cities or another concept called the circular cities. So there are actually three types of cities that I'm trying to draw your attention to: sustainable cities, circular cities, smart cities. So these are all overlapping concepts. Each one is different in its own way, but there are a lot of things which are common in between. Circular city concept is a major concept which has come with a topic which you perhaps heard about the idea of circular economy in one of the earlier sessions. Circular cities are cities which are an extension, or rather a part of a broader concept called circular economy. I'll just tell you very quickly what the idea of circular economy is so that we can understand what that circularity is all about. So far in our economic systems, in our consumption production, or rather production consumption system, we have followed a linear path. And that path is also known as take, make, and waste. You take from nature, you take the natural resources from nature, you make whatever goods and services you want to through your production process, and the byproducts which you generate are the waste. So this system is known as the take, make, waste system. And this system, as you can see, it follows a straight line. It's a linear model. But what economists are talking about, and industry and business houses are also now very aware all over the world, is that this linear model is posing a threat, posing a challenge to sustainability. And we need to have a circular economic system where what we take, make, will not go as a waste but come back. That is the circularity. And similar is the concept of a circular city. Circular city applies the concept of circular economy where things become circular. It is what you start from is where you get back. So that is the circularity, a circular motion, which is a lesson from nature, which it's shameful to say that we humans did not take that lesson from nature. In nature, everything is cyclical. Starting from your carbon cycle to nitrogen cycle, everything moves in a circular fashion. But we took a very linear fashion. We'll just take, use, waste, and go ahead. Circular city is a concept which comes from here. it says that we have to eliminate or reduce the waste that we generate in our production system. Actually, production is the culprit. And in economic theory, we say production is the central economic activity. So everything starts from production. Unless you produce, there's nothing for you to consume. So production is the central activity. And in the production system, we have done this take, make, waste business. Now, Circular City says that it can implement and it should implement circular economic models by eliminating or at least reducing waste. It should keep the assets at its highest value, which means the natural assets which we use, which we have been using over the years, have to be kept at its highest value and not wasted and thrown here and there. This, of course, talks about digital enabling of the system. We have to become digitally enabled, but we also have to keep in mind that there has to be a balance in becoming digitally enabled and in generating economic prosperity with what is ecologically or naturally sustainable. We have to, in the end, improve our livability. And we have to develop resilience. As we said, resilience is perhaps the buzzword today. That resilience meaning that we have to get back to where we were after whatever we have done or whatever shock we have received. In doing that, cities, circular cities, have 3 types of circular actions that they have to take up. It's looping, regenerating, and adapting. Okay, 3 circular actions for circular cities. Looping means we will close the loop. By reducing the waste or by reusing the waste, we will close the loop. That is the first action. The second action is regeneration. We will regenerate, we will restore and preserve the urban ecosystems. So that is regeneration. We regenerate the ecosystem. We so far have been only destroying the urban ecosystem. Okay. And finally, adaptation. We must adapt, we must capacitate the city, the citizens to adapting new measures of restoration and preservation. Let us remember very clearly that there is nothing new in the natural cycle. There should have been nothing new in the life cycle that we should have followed or what we have to follow now. There's nothing new as such. We just have to adapt to those, and science, technology will have to adapt to those basic natural challenges, basic natural systems. We have to have renewed use of the existing one. The existing structure has to be used in a more resource efficient way. So we are not talking about creating new things. We are talking about what we have to be used in a circular fashion so that the loop is closed, so that we are able to regenerate, preserve, restore what we have, and we are able to adapt to the emerging challenges. To do that, there are 4 supporting actions. What are these 4 supporting actions? Optimization, sharing, substitution, and localization. These are 4 types of actions which are possible for us. Why I'm talking about circular cities, why I'm talking about these actions is because we all can do it. And that is where we all become stakeholders, we all become contributors. Optimization of production and consumption through efficient ecological and process uses. As we have been saying from the beginning, production and consumption, these are the 2 economic activities that we have to aim at. So optimization, those who are from a science background, mathematical background would know, optimization refers to maximization and minimization both. Optimization may be maximization depending on what you're maximizing, and optimization may be minimization depending on what it is that you're talking about. If it is a social good, optimization would mean having more of it. If it is a social bad, optimization should meaning, say pollution, we should be having the minimum of it. Clean air should be maximized, polluted air should be minimized. So optimization of all our activities, consumption activities and production activities through efficient processes so that we have the best ecological as well as economic outcome. Sharing. Each one of us can do it. Examples are co-housing, co-sharing, co-sharing of spaces, co-sharing of transport. These are very, very easy to adapt to and very easy to implement as one of the supporting action in a circular framework. Substitution, we have to move from renewable to non-renewable resources. There's a lot of discussion going on everywhere. And localization, we also must be looking at local products, promotion of local activities, promotion of local goods and services, so that transportation is saved. And transportation, as we know, is one of the major sectors where environmental degradation is generated. So having local products, it's as simple as saying that instead of purchasing something online, if we purchase that from the street corner store, the kirana store, then you save a lot of your digital footprint, you save a lot of the transport footprint that the vendor would be making use of. So these are very, very simple things that we can do. Along with this, there is another concept which is very much in discussion these days, nature-based solutions for everywhere, particularly for urban spaces. Nature-based solutions, or NBS, to create urban green spaces, create urban green infrastructure. Green infrastructure in urban cities is kind of a net where you have all economic activities and you also have due care given to the ecological balance. And that is why we talk so much about urban greening these days. Urban greening in a well thought out, planned manner, not a random tree here and a tree there, but proper greening through proper urban planning, creating green city space where trees can become very good guards against air pollution. So having green cover, tree cover, where several studies have shown that if we have a line of trees as the boundary, then the pollution levels that you have outside and the pollution level that you have inside that tree boundary is significantly different. So tree actually stands as a guard. Trees also stand as a guard for noise pollution. It's not only the suspended particulate matters and other gaseous pollutants, but it's also something which can check noise pollution. There are living wall systems which are talked about a lot these days. And some of these you will see in the city, in the flyovers, roadsides, you will see these living wall systems. So these are some of the very easy nature-based solutions. We also must look at the other ecosystem services, preserving, as we have been saying, restoration and preservation of urban spaces where you have, say, wetlands. Other ecosystem services which are generated from these green and wet spaces in cities. Some of these provide marketable products. Like if you are talking about urban forests, for example, then you will find some of the products which are marketable. You are getting fruits, flowers, even you can get honey. So all these are marketable products which you get from these ecosystems, but you can also get ecosystem services which are non-marketable. Say if you are having the other ones that I just talked about, having trees, that's a non-marketable ecosystem service. If I'm feeling happy, it gives me utility by looking at trees, by inhaling clean air. It's a non-marketable service. So all these both have to be part of the urban planning for nature-based solutions. Measuring, quantifying the marketable ones is much easier, but non-marketable services and their estimation is also an area where a lot of work is being done. How do we estimate the value of a tree, for example? A 50-year-old tree, how much is its value? If you have followed news, you would find that there have been some Supreme Court judgments also on estimating the value of trees. It happened, I think, in West Bengal, where some trees were cut down for urban development. And then there was a public interest litigation. And the Supreme Court gave, they actually appointed a committee for the valuation of these trees. And those are in lakhs. Those values are in lakhs. So these solutions are solutions not to be destroyed. Rather, these are solutions which are to be rejuvenated, regenerated. We can create urban forests, we can create habitat islands. I take this opportunity to very quickly mention something that we all at IP College are very proud of. IP College is a habitat island. We have the Jamuna on one side and we have the North Delhi Ridge on the other, and in between our campus is a naturally created green space. IP College campus is a heritage space and it's a natural heritage. We have conducted censuses on campus and we have found 91 tree species and 54 bird species on campus. So this is also an example. Very proudly, I'm stating it here that our campus is an example of an urban forest or a habitat island or a nature-based solution which must be preserved as a heritage and which we very proudly and efficiently are managing. These are some of the well-known pictures. This is IP College campus. I'm very proud to show the green scenario, the green space that we have. This one is one of those living wall systems that I was talking about, that if you have this kind of living walls, these actually act as noise barriers. These are some of the practices that we can have for urban greening in several, these are some very well-known practices that several cities have been trying. Now comes the question of us, we as the community. What do we as individuals do? The broad perspective, if we can talk about, is one of ownership. We must own the space that we reside in. And that ownership brings in an accountability, that ownership brings in a responsibility. This is a report that I would like to mention here, the Dasgupta Review, The Economics of Biodiversity. Sir Partha Dasgupta was appointed by the British government to carry out this survey, and he has submitted the report just a couple of months ago, February 2021, and it's known as The Economics of Biodiversity, the Dasgupta Review, where he has shown the ecological deficit that we have created, the ecological footprint that our actions of consumption and production, mostly centered in cities, have created, and how much it is more than the biocapacity, the capacity that nature has. So it has actually become unsustainable. We have far exceeded the biocapacity. The ecological capacity that the planet has is much less than the ecological footprint that we have left on the planet through our own production and consumption activities. He has given all those formula and estimates. I'm not going into those. And then he has talked about 3 routes of solution, the way ahead. He calls it the way ahead: environmental education, environmental investment, and behavioral and lifestyle change. And it's quite clearly visible here that communities have major roles to play in all 3 of them. If we have to have ecological balance, if we have to have ecological sustainability and not get destroyed by 2100, or maybe much earlier, 2050, then these are the 3 things that we have to have. So community ownership must come in terms of environmental education. Community ownership and sense of belonging and responsibility must come in terms of environmental investment. And each one of us will have to have changes in our lifestyle pattern. In environmental education, we have to have environmental awareness, environmental consciousness, which may be executed through curriculum-based education. As you know, that environmental education has become compulsory. All undergraduate students in all colleges all over India have a course in environmental education. It's a curriculum-based education. Schools, they have environmental education. Other than these curriculum-based education, there are other agencies. Family is an agency where environmental education can be imparted. Institutions, of course, media, both print, electronic, these are all agencies through which we can expand our knowledge base. And it has been seen, and several studies have shown how media can be effective in implementing environmental awareness, how families can impart education, institutions, of course. So actually, these are all to be worked together. In families, parents are very influential. In institutions, the teachers are very influential. In the media, whatever comes in print has its own credibility. So all these institutions or all these agencies can play very, very important roles in extending environmental education. It's not only the theory, not only the knowledge based on textbooks, but it should actually translate to real life education. For example, disaster risk, students' curriculum should be so designed that they are prepared to challenge, prepared to face. Suppose, for example, there is an earthquake while children are in school. There's a fire breaking out while children are in schools or colleges. So there should be proper trainings. That is also part of environmental education. Because the way we have gone for hundreds of years, post-industrial revolution, there is no way of reverting to the pre-industrial revolution situation. So the damages are done. So we cannot stop the climate change. We cannot stop natural calamities and disasters. But what we can do is not to aggravate it in future. Some will definitely happen. That is what the recent reports are also saying. That it cannot be that with all the measures that are being talked about, you will go back to the pre-industrial revolution situation. We cannot do that. You cannot revert to that kind of a life. And such things will happen. But what we need to prepare ourselves for is how to face those situations and not to aggravate those situations in future. And that is the whole purpose of preparedness. We are no way saying that there will be no more flood, there will be no more cyclone. There will be. But the frequency has to be, we should try to check, and we should be prepared to face those situations and not increase the frequency. And therefore, the civil society has to come up in a big way. The global responsibility is something that we must be talking about. Environmental investment will not come unless it comes as a mandate. Environmental investment meaning those kind of investment, those kind of economic programs and projects which are aimed towards environmental sustainability. No private firm which is guided by profit motive will be interested in doing this unless there is some kind of either a mandate or some kind of an incentive. Both incentive and mandate can come only from states, and states will do it only if it becomes a responsibility. That is why at the global level we have to have these negotiations. In the Millennium Development Goal that I was talking about, the last goal, MDG 8, was about international cooperation, because environmental and ecological problems, climate problems, these are transboundary problems. You cannot say that there is a climate issue in Bangladesh and India can escape that, or there's a problem in India and Pakistan can escape that. These are transboundary problems. It's just like, say, the river issues, transboundary problems. Ganga, Padma, Tista, all these are transboundary river dispute issues, Brahmaputra, all these, because nature does not follow these political boundaries. And therefore, we have to have international negotiations. We have to define environment, ecology, climate as a global responsibility. If there is some kind of a disturbance in the Pacific Ocean, there is El Nino somewhere happening, and then you have the coastlines in some other country facing some kind of cyclones, then there should be a global resilience fund. If something is happening in place A because of something happening in place B, then why should it be only the responsibility of the government in place A and not the entire world? For example, when we had the Amazon rainforest on fire, the whole world must be taking that as a responsibility, because the Amazon forests are known as the lungs of the entire planet. So the question of global responsibility comes here. And therefore, environmental investment, as Dasgupta is talking about, he is talking about, as I said, environmental investment. He's talking about investment in those projects which are green, which are sustainable in nature. For that, we need international understanding. From Rio 1992 to Paris 2015, there has been a long list of such summits. You must be familiar with some of those. It's a long list. Rio, Montreal, Kyoto, Marrakesh, Cancun, Bali, everything. So many, so many. So through all these, international leaders have been at least perceived to be coming to some kind of a negotiation. The latest is Paris 2015. The IPCC assessment report, the sixth assessment report, has just come up. I'm sure by now you are well aware of the details of the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, their assessment report 6, which has just been released in August. And there is going to be a Glasgow round, another round in Glasgow in November, where the Paris Agreement and all the terms and conditions of the Paris Agreement will be made functional. What I am trying to draw your attention to is that all these negotiations should be aiming at international consensus on having funds, having investments for the global transformation to green technology, right? Now, in that, if we are talking about green technology transformation, we are talking about a movement from renewable to non-renewable, then there's a component which has to be taken with a bone of, which is a bone of contention. India and China have been identified as the greatest polluters. And when this question of cutting down I don't know whether you must be aware of all these details, because these are all part of the IPCC report, the net zero emission target to be cut down over 2030, by 2050, by 2100. And the IPCC has given alternative scenarios that if we can cut it down by these many degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial level. I mean, you must be knowing by now 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial level is what our target is. And 1.1 degrees Celsius we have already increased. So it's only 0.4 degrees Celsius buffer that we have. And then the IPCC report gives alternative scenarios that if we cut it down by this much by this year, then what would be the resulting rise in the temperature? If we do it by 2030, if we do it by 2050, if we do it by 2100. So alternative scenarios are given. But the bottom line there is that we are aiming at net zero emission. That means finally saying an absolute no to fossil fuel. And all countries will have to switch to green technology, renewable resources. There are major technological questions there. I'm not going to that. E-vehicles, solar, these things have become very, very fashionable. But technology people say that there are caveats there as well. Whatever it may be, this transformation is asking all countries to come down to net zero emission. That means zero emission from fossil fuel. India and China are not agreeing to it, and they are pointing at a common but differentiated responsibility. The idea is that all the countries which were responsible for the industrial revolution and those who have already been responsible for the damage starting from the industrial revolution, and the countries like India, China, and many other developing countries who started much later and are therefore still on the path of growing industrialization, how can all of them be given the same target? Someone starting in 250 years ago and someone starting 75 years ago in the process of industrialization are not at the same stages, same levels of industrialization. Therefore, India has higher CO2 emissions. China has higher CO2 emissions. So there should be differentiated responsibility. We are not responsible for the industrial revolution. We followed, yes, of course we followed, but we have been latecomers. So those who have the historical responsibility for the industrial revolution should have stronger targets. They should be given larger responsibilities compared to the latecomers who started industrializing much later, urbanizing much later. And that is where we are stuck. That if the United States or the G8 countries or all the developed countries, they reduce their heating and cooling, not cooling so much as we understand, but more importantly, heating requirements, then a lot of energy gets saved there. They have to cut down their consumption levels. They have to adjust their production levels. It's not enough to put the same. One shoe does not fit all. And that is where this question becomes a major political question. Green technology transformation. We are talking about green technology everywhere. This transformation to say solar power. There's a lot of hue and cry about solar as if solar has got a magic wand. I would like to share with my young friends that 100 years ago, bakelite was something like this. Bakelite was a magic 100 years ago. And today, plastic has become the greatest menace on on the planet Earth. So maybe the solar panels, and there are several components, lithium, titanium, rare earth, several things which are used in the solar panels, in the wind turbines. So green technology is also not a magic wand. So these become very, very important international issues where environmental investment has to be made in a very, very judicious way. And this example of bakelite, I hope you understand what is bakelite. I mean, the handles which you see in the non-stick fry pans, say, or pressure cookers, that's bakelite. That is what was discovered 100 years ago, and that revolutionized use of plastic, revolutionized the world. And within 100 years, that has become the greatest curse for our life. So the so-called green technology today, this also has a very geopolitical issue here. I'm sharing this perhaps because I think perhaps you are also following the international political scenario. The geopolitics about it is that Afghanistan today has a huge reserve of these materials. Starting from lithium to rare earth elements, Afghanistan has the reserve. So any economy which is trying to move to the green technology will be interested in these materials. So Afghanistan therefore becomes a very, very hot spot of the geopolitics. So there are many issues which we need to keep in mind when we are talking about what we can do and what we should. We started from sustainable cities and sustainable communities. I think I have gone way beyond that. But let us remember that all these are centered to our lives in cities and urban spaces. And this is what we all know. We all are responsible for this. The way the planet has grown, planet in the sense, not in a natural sense, in the economic sense, the way our consumption has grown, it is estimated, it is Dasgupta's estimate only, where he shows that we need a planet which is 1.7 times the size of the current planet that we have if we have to meet the trend of global demand. Global demand, the way it has increased over years, if that trend follows, then we actually require 1.7 times the size of our planet. And consumerism has increased very, very fast after the 1990s. I mean, I don't really have to read out the list that I have put here. We all know that these have become part and parcel of our lives. And we have forgotten nature in the process. So from a gadget-based, gadget-driven life to a nature-driven life is something which is a clear, non-negotiable situation that we have. For that, we need scientific and technological inputs, but we also need the political will. The political leadership has to go for environmental protection. I'm not presenting those figures because those are cumbersome figures, but there are calculations. If we look at our own budget figures also, we find that environmental protection has been receiving the lowest share in the budget allocation in our country. If we compare environmental protection, education, health, social security, other than economic activities, then we find that over a time series, over cross section, in whichever way we look at the data, we find that environmental protection has got the lowest share of fund allocation. That shows the kind of political will that we have. I'm sorry, I wish I had those figures here. It's somewhere else. I mean, if anybody is interested, I can share those. Environment protection does not have a priority. Most of the developing nations do not have environmental protection as a priority, but it is part of what is known as ecological human rights. We talk about economic and social human rights a lot. We know all those what it means. Economic human rights would talk about the basic needs. Social human rights will talk about freedom, but we don't talk about ecological human rights. If ecology, environment are related to the definition of quality of life, then ecological human rights must be a part of the government agenda, and then environmental protection must be brought to the forefront. We must learn our lessons from the past. We must have the principles of ethics, but these are all questions of philosophy and ethics, that everybody should be having a human right. Everybody should have a right to have a clean living. It's a question of ethics, it's a question of philosophy. And if we look at the political philosophy, the various principles, various schools of thought, we would find that it's not self interest that defines human society. Some of you may be familiar with the name of Adam Smith, who is known as the father of economics, and his name is associated with self interest. That it's self interest which drives human beings, and market is the place where everybody's interest is met. But in the process, we forget that Adam Smith wrote another book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And in the book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, Adam Smith said very clearly that there is some inherent sentiment, morality in us, which guides us towards some kind of a happiness which we derive by sharing or by watching the others. Human beings are social animals, and that is where the principle of ethics, the philosophy, comes here, that human beings are not only such selfish creatures. We live in a society. So laws of science, laws of technology, all these things can be very well synchronized with nature and with the social principles. And if we look at the past, if we look at history, then we will find that good life, welfare of the society rests on the pillars of history and philosophy. And human civilization has shown that we are the only species, only race who can actually come together on the basis of principles. Cats and dogs can't, but human beings can. And history has shown us that for political reasons, for economic reasons, for academic reasons, we do come together. So, for natural reasons, for ecological reasons, there is every hope that we can come together. As we have grown, history of human civilization has been very, very violent, very, very gory. As we have progressed, we have been more and more unkind to animals. And that is our history. But it's time to revisit that. It's time to come to some kind of a, what should I say, some kind of a synchronization with all members of nature, and human beings can do that. What we have done for political or economic reasons, we can use those same sentiments, same spirit, same consciousness, same accountability to come together, bring a nature resilient, ecologically sustainable society. And with that hope, I close my discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really a very interesting and captivating talk. Today, we got to learn various new concepts, and it was really interesting. It was like to go on and on and on. I just now realized, like, it's like you have just spoken for 10 minutes. Very nicely, ma'am, you have introduced the students to the goals of sustainability, and how should be a true sustainable city can be built. And very rightly, you have underlined the targets for the SDG 11. I'm sure because these are undergrad students, they will not be very much familiar with these concepts. And the concept of circular cities, this was very much new, even for the postgraduate participants that we are having. How we can develop the circular cities and the 3 circular actions that you have told us today for building the circular cities, which are the best outcome today, and that which is the basic requirement that we need today in order to achieve the concept of sustainable cities, or building the sustainable cities. And the nature-based solutions, which is the center point of even the Green Climate Fund and the various United Nations organizations also, to combat the climate change. Thank you so much, ma'am, for introducing our participants to that. That is really the need of the hour, because most of us don't know about it. The general public do not know about it, and the general awareness about the green base, nature based solutions, the green solutions, is very much important. The list is long. We have learned so many new things today. Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an engrossing and captivating lecture once again. So now I would like to tell everyone the session is open for the questions. So now, if you have any question or doubt or any idea, so please write in the chat box. I will, ma'am, would you
I
like to?
can read. I can read the chat box.
Sarni is asking a question, ma'am. She has asked at 3:44, like I think during your session only. If you can see, social media has a role in the surge of consumerism.
Now, instead of having it as a question answer session, let us have it as a discussion session.
Sure.
Sarni is asking, social media also has a role in the surge of consumerism due to flex culture and rapidly changing trends. Yes. I mean, I don't really have anything to expand this. I mean, I suppose if we talk about, say, for example, advertisement, a, a lot of this consumerism is driven by advertisement and media. Therefore, I mean, if I may be very honest, then I would say media. If you notice, if you observe newspapers, a student of mine actually worked on this, and we saw that media is very, very peculiar in defining the responsibility, because media is very responsible for creating public opinion, right? So you would find that there is a seasonal trend. If you go from month to month, you would find that there are certain months, say for example August, in the newspaper you will find a lot of news on the Delhi floods. Right now, I mean, if you look at the newspaper, you will find water logging and Yamuna water level rising up, or danger mark, or yes or no, this kind of things. Then November, you will find a lot of news on pollution, right? Stubble burning and air pollution. But there is, and you will also find news related to water scarcity in the peak summer months. But if you look at the entire 12-month period, you will not really find any consistent commitment towards environment that our media is, putting in front of us. So environmental commitment of the media is also something which is taken as, to be very frank, to be taken as a product. What sells at what point of time? But what we definitely need is a sustained effort by the agencies, as I was talking about, institutions. We are trying to do it at our level, at the institutional level. But media, yes. On the other hand, when you're talking about consumerism, a big way, a very, very big way, consumerism is promoted by the media. The social media, the greater evil, I'm sorry to say, to my younger generation, the way social media has proliferated, and the kind of things your Bollywood stars wear and the kind of things they do. I mean, this is, I don't know. I mean, for an old woman like me, I don't really see how to come out of this. This is kind of a, uh, business, industry, media nexus. But I am very hopeful that if we have contributed to this situation, if we are part of the situation, it is us who can come out of this situation also. We can break the situation. And that comes with commitment and goodwill. I'm very optimistic about that. And as a member of the older generation, I really keep faith in you to change lifestyle. Business houses will not like the idea of lifestyle change and behavioral change. But if you do it, ultimately production is dependent on demand. If I don't want to change my mobile phone every year, then finally down the line somewhere it will stop production or reduce production. It's as basic as this. there is, I think, especially for our generation, social media trends and comparison become so significant. Yes, absolutely. Himanshu Chaudhary has got a question. She says, you said state does something when it becomes responsibility, and something becomes responsibility in a representative democracy when it is related with electoral gain, and for people, they will make something their priority. Now, this is becoming, I don't have any issue, but this is becoming politically very sensitive. They will make something their priority when the thing will hamper their economic capacity. So, ma'am, what are the ways to create environmental consciousness among masses? How can we expand link between people's wealth and environmental health? Now, this is politically very, very sensitive. We all know the way several projects in our country have got the sanction in the last 1 year, starting from the Western Ghats to the Central Vista. These projects have just been given special sanction, violating environmental norms and environmental requirements. That is a clear case of, what should I say, lack of political will for environmental protection. Now, the question that she's asking is, how do we create environmental consciousness among masses? Now, this is a question which I think is better understood or thought out by the younger generation. And therefore, I would like to open this to the house for all of you and any of you, whoever wants to contribute, and work out a blueprint for your own future. As an old person, I don't have many more years on the planet, but you do. And I feel very sorry. I mean, on every possible forum, I apologize on behalf of my generation and my previous generations for handing over a planet to you for which you are not responsible. So I'm opening this question to the House. How do you think we can create environmental consciousness? How can we link people's wealth and environmental health? And I suppose Himanshu is trying to say that the purpose of human wealth, consumerism, wealth, luxury levels of living, luxury consumption, all these things coming at the cost of environmental health. How do we, address this challenge? What do you people think? The young and fresh minds think. Like for me, changing the mobile phone every year is out of question. But for you, are these kind of things possible to change behavior and lifestyle? Is this possible to create forums? There is a 13-year-old girl who has become a global leader and set an example of how issues may be raised. However, it's unfortunate to say that we do not know whether the world leaders who are 60, 70 years old with years of political experience will be paying due attention to the 13-year-old girl, not 13 anymore, but she started when she was 13. So that is where the role of the mass, the role of the community comes. So I'm opening it, for everyone to contribute to. Let us think how we can do it. I have done my very small bit by raising these issues in front of you. It's a very small thing, which comes as a part of my profession. But as a citizen, I can try to have, some role being played in waste collection, segregation management, the tree plantation. But beyond that, when it becomes a large issue, then the community has to come in. And community power is a great power. Human history shows that. It may be an authoritarian regime in one country, it may be an authoritarian regime in our country at one point of time, but human history says that people's power is the strongest power. So if we all feel we can do it, through appropriate psychological intervention, yes, we can. Of course we can. And we must. It's not only can. We have to, because it's a question of our own survival. It's an existential crisis that we are facing. So anybody, all those who are present here, anybody, whoever wants to say something on this about our future blueprint, the blueprint for our life, please, please come forward.
Anyone else want to ask any question? And if you want, you can also unmute yourself and speak up.
Yes,
If it
yes.
is taking time
Any
to
comment,
type,
any
yeah,
comment,
please.
any question, any discussion is welcome. Because these are issues where collective wisdom works. We are talking about community, so let us behave like a community.
Ma'am, while the students are framing the questions, I just have a question. Like as you have also discussed, and we know that Government India's initiative right now is to develop the smart cities, which is totally like which, as you have also suggested, that basically which focuses more and more on the digitalization or the economic growth and development, while we also have to achieve the SDG 11 targets. Like we are not like we are in 2021 and those targets are for 2030. So I am just asking how to, like, as we know that this must be hampering our targets of SDG 11. So how can we, like, be like with the concept that we are having of smart cities, and how can we attain the SDG 11 targets on time? Like, how can we do it? Is there some middle way, or how can we work on it? Like, there has to be some way out,
I
but
have
we are
no
not going.
answer. I have no answer. I wish I could forward this question to the Niti Aayog.
True.
I really am. That's
It's a
why I
good
brought in
question.
the smart city idea, because I personally find it very disturbing. If people
True.
who live in Delhi, if you visit the smart city which has come up near Ames, Kidwai Nagar, it's an urban heat island.
True. It is.
It's an urban heat, and it's so ugly to see that smart city
Hmm.
just next to Ames.
True.
So equally ugly is the Central Vista. I'm sorry to say this.
So that's a very big question in my mind. Like, how can we do? We have to antagonistic. They have made a new initiative which is totally antagonist to the, SDG 11s. Yeah,
That is
sustainable
very
development goals
disturbing,
that we
very,
have.
very
Yeah,
disturbing,
true.
very disturbing.
It
And
is.
during the COVID pandemic,
Hmm.
the project started, Central Vista project started. And this is unbelievable in any country of the world. I'm
True.
sorry if I'm sounding biased, uh, but it does not really require any political ideology. It's just basic human.
That's true. Anyone else want to ask anything? Okay, Naveen.
Thank you, ma'am, for
Naveen,
once again taking us to classrooms, with all the STG information. So I had a very generic question, and I thought I'll ask that question at the end so that it can sort of wind up the session. So, around the world, we see a lot of, very recently, a lot of political instability. Especially in the neighborhood, we also see in Africa, not in South Asia, in Middle East. Then around the world, we see failing economies, weaker economies. Around the world, we see lack of government's will to design developmental programs which can turn into long-term sustainable measures. So, with all this happening around, do you think that no, even with sustainable development goals, we might end up just like Millennium Development Goals? Where we were standing in 2016 with MDGs, in 2030 we'll be standing at the same platform with SDGs. So I don't want to sound pessimistic here, but there is a probability. So what are your what is your opinion on that? How do you see the success of SDG at the end of 2030?
a very tall order. Attaining SDG is all the 17 SDGs to a moderately high level by 2030 is a very tall order. You don't want to sound pessimistic, but you are pessimistic, so am I. But let us, as I was trying to say, that human civilization, human history has many lessons for us, which we have somehow overlooked. I mean, even my own discipline, economics, has overlooked those, philosophical principles, those moral questions and sentimental questions. And therefore, such surges have come and many surges have come and gone. So let us not lose faith in humanity. Let us not lose faith in human instincts, human sentiments, moral sentiments, if we may use Adam Smith's term. And let us be not pessimistic, let us be optimistic that good sense will prevail in the political leadership, not in our country, all over, in all countries. I mean, I just mentioned about the geopolitics in Afghanistan. Why are these countries so interested in Afghanistan? I mean, if I may take names, people are saying Pakistan, China, and Russia, whatever, and America was there for 20 years. So there are economic interests. And let us hope that it does not become this ecological interest or ecological transition does not become only a political game or an economic game. It should, in the end, have some commitment towards humanity. And that is what has driven human civilization for so many thousands of years. And we still exist. And we, as a species on Earth, at the highest level, have to come up with a solution. There is a person, Harari, I don't know whether anyone has heard about him. He's a historian. He's a Jewish historian from Hebrew University, Yuval Noah Harari. He has come up with 3 books. And in those 3 books, he has summarized the history of human civilization. And there he is showing what human history has been through various ages and various civilizations. And he's arguing, I use one of his things in the course of my lecture, that it's only us who can come together for a common interest. And in the beginning, when I defined community, we said that this is what defines a community, a common interest. And Harari clearly has shown with all historical evidence that it is only us who have come close together for political reasons, for economic reasons, for religious reasons, which is of very, very topical significance in today's world. For religious reasons also, people have come together. So we will have to come together. He has given 21 challenges for the 21st century. And he's finally saying that we will have to do it if we want to exist. And if we are not ready to face extinction, the apocalypse, and finally Noah's Ark with the seeds of every species for the next round of civilization from scratch, then we will be able to form a kind of consensus. And with that note of hope and optimism, I know, I mean, it's not a direct answer to your question because your question does not have a direct answer. Had there been an answer to the question, then problems would have been solved. But let us not lose hope because we have done it in the past. Humankind has done it in the past.
Ma'am, just a quick follow-up. Thank you, ma'am. Just a quick follow-up to that, to your answer. So, I mean, there are 2 ways we can approach a goal. I mean, if you're making any goal for ourselves or even a goal for a community or countries. So one is that psychologically we keep a realistic goal and we try to achieve it. We put everything that we have to achieve those goals. And the other way is that we keep a very unrealistic goal and then we make our undying efforts to achieve those goals. But we may not achieve it ever, but in the process of doing so, we may do some good to ourselves. So if SDGs are the second kind of psychological approach that maybe we have kept some 17 SDG goals, which we probably will never be able to achieve, at least within the stipulated timeline, then do you think that if we kind of revise the goals itself, that can help? Or if we revise the timeline, that would help in making it a real, achievable within a realistic time frame. So whether we extend 2030 to say 2050, and if we plan to extend, so how long that the deadlines should be extended so that we can achieve these goals realistically. I mean, that's the only question that I mean in the follow-up.
Development is a multidimensional concept. Development is such a multidimensional concept that there are so many things. I mean, starting from education to demography to everything is involved in your sustainable development. The rate at which population grows in our country, just imagine the population size that we will achieve by 2050. And that is where these things vary from country to country, from context to context. What one country can do within 10 years, another country perhaps can do only in 50 years. Like the population projection that we have now says that this kind of a trend will continue at least till 2050, at least till this generation. The demographic dividend that we talk about. I mean, the median age in our country today is 27. So this generation will live on this planet for another 50 years at least. So for the next 50 years, we are sealed. So it's very, very different. On the other hand, in developed countries, there are negative rates of growth of population. So how can you have the same set of goals for all countries? The point that I raised about the common but differentiated responsibility in the context of net zero emission. I mean, one shoe does not fit all. I mean, what we can do in 10 years, somebody else will do it in 2 years. So it has to have that flexibility. And that is where the international politics comes. Why do these summits fail? Why is still there this North-South divide? Starting from the Industrial Revolution till 2015 Paris Summit and the upcoming Glasgow Summit in November, don't you think certain countries and their leadership will dominate? They will. And development, therefore, is not only ecology and environment, it's not only economics, it is not only society, in a big way, it is in, politics. Development has so many issues. Development is actually an umbrella beneath which everything else fits in. So therefore, sustainable development is kind of a pet phrase, but it's a very difficult concept, very, very difficult concept. What is sustainable for me may not be sustainable for another country. And there are short-term issues, there are long-term issues. Like the example of bakelite is something which is very close to my heart. In 100 years, the boon has become a bane. Bakelite revolutionized everything, packaging. And now that is the greatest menace. So there is nothing permanent as a solution. That will also be dynamic, that will also keep on changing. I mean, in my limited understanding, this is all that I can say. So we have to be flexible with reference to time, place, and context.
Thank you, ma'am. So, so what you're saying is that to have customized goals for every country, to have tailor-made goals specific for any country, which would be specific to their local context, would probably be more practical approach than having one set of goals for everybody.
Perhaps tailor-made may sound a bit, what should I say, non-serious perhaps, but actually that is what I mean. I mean, everybody cannot do everything. I mean, every target cannot be imposed on everybody.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Divya is also asking a question, if you can please answer her. Divya Goyal.
I think this was the same question which was thrown open to everyone, how to motivate people. So please come up with suggestions. I have done my bit of motivation through this 1 and almost 2 hours of talking. But practically translating that to practical action is actually a much taller order. So I'm asking the participants and everybody, even Naveen, Neha, I'm asking everybody, because you have been teaching environmental studies for so many years, for generations of students, so many batches of students. So do you think it's possible to motivate people? As teachers, you definitely have a very important role because teachers can influence young minds. And as citizens, how do we influence people? Each one taking it to the community, and then in a geometric progression, it increases. That's one way of doing it. I mean, several organizations do it. That I take an oath and I promise that I will make another 5 people take the oath. Each one will take the oath to have another 5, and then it becomes a human chain of not only taking oath, but also action. So what do you suggest as professionals that we can do in the society? I'm throwing it open to everyone.
Ma'am, the one way I think that people can be amply motivated for creating a better world altogether, I mean, in a broad sense, is that because for a very long period of time, we all have been talking about creating awareness, and generating awareness. And in past 30 to 40 years of environmentalism and environmental awareness campaigns, I think we have generated enough of environmental awareness among people. But that kind of awareness is not translated into actions many a times. There are very far and few environmental movements that we have seen even in India, which has been which were successful. So I think one way is that if we somehow make these changes compulsory. What I mean to say is that I mean, we don't work very nicely with human minds with something which is optional to us. So in some way, if a particular change becomes compulsory, if we are able to provide tangible benefits to the communities, to people, by bringing in some change, I think these kind of initiatives have worked better than any other ways. I mean, we have seen from several examples. In fact, in the coming session, where we are going to talk about coming part of our course, community and conservation, which is the theme. We will be taking up a lot of examples from South India, from North India, where communities which have been involved in, actively involved in conservation projects, from where they have derived some benefits, maybe economic benefits, mostly economic benefits. These ideas worked way better than just going out to the community, reaching out to them and saying that, okay, let us save forests, let us save tigers, because people fail to see the benefit which they are going to get it. I mean, if you ask someone who is living in a metropolitan city like Delhi that, okay, we want to save tigers in Jim Corbett or lions in Gir, and you should contribute something for that. I mean, people fail to see the benefit that they are going to have. They will be benefited more if we extend 1 or 2 metro lines for them. So if we can bring those benefits to the community, I think that kind of involvement can work better. I mean, that's one way. I mean,
the problem there is, as we were saying, that the urban communities are the least coherent communities. Communities in rural areas, forest areas, they are more coherent, and their economic benefits are very direct. I mean, examples of participatory forest management has shown that there are forests which are jointly managed, where the local people are part of decision making and they also get some economic benefits out of it. But cities are actually very, very incoherent. We don't see any common benefit coming out of our existence, right? And that is where command and control becomes very, very important. Some kind of a mandate, some kind of a diktat. Ban plastic means ban plastic, not half-heartedly. But those are things which are lacking. And that is also perhaps one of the features of a developing society. Developed societies have very strong institutions for implementation of policies also. Developing societies have very, loose structures in terms of institutions. So starting from markets to legal institutions to judicial institutions, all institutions are weaker. That is a feature of lack of development. So like when you are talking about COVID, you are giving packed food to people for COVID management, and then your plastic packets are back. So these are the kind of challenges that we face in developing economies where population is huge. Lack of development and large population makes our lives much more challenging. Right?
Yes, ma'am. True. You're right.
These are that way very, very difficult concepts.
Very
difficult concepts.
And one more thing I would like to add, what I have experienced, like from my experience, like, ma'am, I believe when I was a kid, when I was like, whatever teacher used to taught us in first, second, third, like about the basic manners. Like we as a kid used to take this home and we used to follow that. And we also used to tell our parents. Like what I believe now, the mandate is there to spread the environmental awareness at the undergraduate level. But what I believe in this school, at the school level, the whatever is being taught to the environmental awareness in like the term environmental awareness I'm using here, that which is being told to students is just plant a tree, आज plantation है, आज ये है, बहुत basic और shallow उनको बताया जाता है. So what I believe, right from the this should be made mandatory through policy changes, right at the school level, the students should be inculcated with the environmental consciousness. Then what I believe, if they will be taught that basic level, then this will become a part of their subconscious mind, and this they will जिसको हम कहते हैं मैम हमारा कल्चरल पार्ट है या जो है which we take from us, from generation to generation, it should become a part of such inculcation, so that it will be inculcated in their minds that they have to do it, they have to preserve environment, they should not use plastic. The teacher should also do that, not only ki sirf plant karna hai, waste nahi karna hai pani, that is something else. So they have to be given very strong knowledge about the environment, what environmental consciousness and protection is in true sense, that we tell our students day to day how by changing their day to day habits they can make a big change. Like, by not keeping on opening the tap while washing their hands or brushing their teeth. This is a very small step. So like, if the kids will be taught this, they will understand it more, and they will start keep on following and spreading this among their parents, and also the families more. That's what I believe. This can, like, but this should
Environment has been reduced to a fashion now,
be true.
right?
Yes.
And kind of a tokenism, which is very, very unfortunate. I mean, that is true at every level. I mean, that is what I was trying to, talk about in the political context, that even at the global level also, these conventions, they have become kind of a regular routine. So many climate conventions, each one failing. What kind of commitment does it show on the part of the leaderships?
That's all.
I think we have
Yes,
spent
ma'am.
2 hours on
Yes.
our discussions.
It is the longest session
Really?
of this time. Yes, in the second series of this course.
This is one comment from Himanshu at the end. I think we can also
What I
read out
think-
his comment
Okay.
on traditional style, going back to traditional ways and traditional methods, how that can
Yes.
also. So,
Well, I mean, if we are talking about traditional methods through scientific arguments, yes. So whatever was there in the past was the best, and whatever we have done or whatever we have taken from the West is to be dumped. Not that kind of an approach, but take the best of both. I mean, if I may put it this way, that just now I was talking about climate conventions. So instead of climate conventions and having all these, if we can look at climate as a convention of human living along the path of our historical journey, the kind of things that you're talking about, the traditional style. Neha was also talking about what we used to do. So these are all conventions. So let climate be a convention in a scientific, logical way, and not reduced only to kind of a token or a climate convention as it is done, convention of parties, the COPs. So not as climate conventions, but as a convention of our own history, where we used to live in, synchronization with nature. The natural, and as I was trying to say in the circular economy concept, that we did not take the lesson from nature. Natural cycles are always circular. Nothing goes waste in nature, but we did not learn it. So those kind of conventions have to come back, but definitely not at the cost of losing scientific rigor. That is the caveat, because in the process, and currently in our country, unfortunately, we are losing that scientific thread of argument in many places. हमारे देश में ये होता था, हमारे देश में वो होता था. In doing that, we should not lose the basic essence of science. So a marriage of tradition and modernity with scientific input is the best solution. Convention and science.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was a really and captivating, and till the end, till 2 hours. It's been 2 hours, the longest session, as you've told
I
me.
hope the participants are not
Yes,
bored.
and they are so much interested. That's why they are showering the questions. And it's thank you so much for such a it was really a great discussion in the end. Thank you so much, ma'am. I want to express my appreciation and a big thank you.
Pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Yes, ma'am, for an inspiring presentation. And surely, through this talk, your years of research and your depth of understanding of this concept of environment, basically, and climate, it truly has nurtured today's session, and your ability to present the subject in such an interesting way. Thank you so much. This has produced one of the most memorable evenings for us, ma'am. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
It was really a pleasure. And it's my home ground.
Yes.
I'm in my home ground.
Ma'am, but really, it was so great listening to you today.
Thank you.
Everyone has learned a lot. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. The participants may leave now. And please keep a tab on the web portal of the course. We will be keep on updating there with the upcoming sessions. All the sessions, the lecture sessions have been already updated there with all the details of the speaker and their topics. And in the next coming week, we will be organizing a documentary for you guys. So please keep a tab and you will definitely be getting the mails for that. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.